Joining me in studio, senior editor at Honest Reporting, Daniel Pomerantz, and political analyst Amir Oren. Gentlemen, a pleasure to have you with me.
Tracy. Thank you, Tracy.
Dan, we'll start with you. At this stage, of course, these are just allegations. But once something makes headlines, like the fact that an 8-month-old baby has been killed at the hands of Israelis, is the war of optics already won, even if perhaps the truth comes out at a later stage?
Well, you know, it all depends on how the press covers the story. In this case, the press rushed to interview everyone in the family, to cover the funeral. And we should be clear also that what we see right now are allegations, but they're supported by other outside information. At the time, a doctor from the hospital told the Associated Press that it was because of a blood disorder, and later Hamas removed baby Layla's name from the list of martyrs. So at the time, the press didn't cover all of those things as thoroughly as they should have. They did not say as strongly as they should have that Hamas, who controls the Gaza Ministry of Health, is on the same international terror lists as ISIS and the Taliban, which are not given credibility in the international media. And now the question is, will the press cover their mistake with as much attention as they covered the initial?
Sure. So what's new here is the fact that there are allegations Hamas actually paid this family to make those claims. Amir, to you, the headline, as Dan is saying, has already achieved, it's affected minds, it's shaped opinions. Now, that can't really be undone. So what's your take on this?
Well, you mentioned the term optics, and that's very true, because pictures speak louder than any caption or any explanation attached to it.
Remember what prompted President Donald Trump to strike Syria? He said it was the pictures that came out of the chemical attack that prompted him to
Yes,
act.
and you know, President Reagan once, during the war in Lebanon in 1982, picked up the phone and called Begin because he saw pictures which he believed were of innocent civilians hit by Israeli shelling. They weren't, but the deed was done anyway. The problem is so many people are biased one way or the other. The number of undecideds is so small that it doesn't really matter. And we are living in an era of relative truth. So truth will out. But what is truth? President Trump ushered the era of fake news, and people got tired of this haggling over what a certain event means. They are looking at the broader context, and people are saying, well, okay, maybe this time around the Palestinians lied, but one has to look at the broader issue, and therefore it is all in the background.
Well, Amir, could I add something to that? We talk about President Trump firing on those chemical weapons facilities. A report just came out that in 2017, the United States caused 500 civilian casualties around the world. And yet, we never hear these stories when the United States strikes Islamic State or strikes the Taliban. The visuals are still out there. They don't always get equal coverage, depending on the situation.
So to a point that you were, I suppose, referring to before, with this philosophy of all is fair in love and war, I suppose if we look at this, Hamas didn't kill the baby. They simply, allegedly, obfuscated the truth to win international sympathy. So looking at the weapons that they have in the Gaza Strip versus the weapons that Israeli has, what do you make of this?
Well, first of all, Hamas has the most important weapon at all. In fact, the only weapon that counts. They have the power to just not do it. Israel throughout has been on a defensive posture against acts that are initiated by Hamas. If Hamas simply didn't engage in violence, there wouldn't be this situation at all. And the media plays into this because Hamas is trying to win a PR victory. They can't succeed on rockets. They can't succeed on tunnels. If the press would show that they also can't succeed in media wars, they would have much less motivation to try.
What's your take on this as a war tactic?
Truth is a very rare commodity in war, and we are in a constant war. Israel has not been shy years ago and fabricated its own events. Actually, we are sitting here in Jaffa, just a few hundred yards from the police station where Israel staged an event to justify the beginning of the 1956 war, when it didn't have anything on the ground. So this is the Orient. People used these devices, and in the long run, it doesn't really matter. It's unfortunate, but the impact is not that great.
Making a parallel, I suppose, once again, with the fact that it was these images that we see coming out of Syria that really do garner international sympathy, and it even got one of the world leaders to act following with his allies to join in to bomb Syria. How important are optics in this particular conflict?
Well, apparently what we saw even today is that some people in the Israeli Knesset wanted a bill barring Israelis and others from taking pictures of Israeli soldiers in the territories for fear that this will hurt Israel propaganda-wise. Transparency is important both for domestic reasons and for Israel's international prestige as a democracy which isn't fearful of the truth.
What do you make of, I suppose, popular opinion that if with this propaganda war here, this war of optics that Israel is losing, what do you attribute that to?
Well, you know, I think that optics are kind of a last resort for Hamas. They haven't been able to win on anything else, and they won't win on this either, because at the end of the day, the people of Gaza have not gained anything from these optics, and the people of Gaza know it. And, you know, the whole point of international law when it comes to war, if you don't mind me being a lawyer for a moment, is to say that, you know, war for now is unavoidable because we're fallible human beings, but we should at least reduce the destruction as much as possible. That's why the law says you cannot be using children in a war, not just as soldiers, but to use them at all.
So and what about the burning fields? Why Israel isn't getting any sympathy for agricultural grounds being burned by these kites?
Because it's not human life here. You know, nobody's died because of these fires.
But this is so-called collateral damage, civilians being hit for no reason, to no avail. How does that advance the Palestinian cause?
Well, I'll tell you what, I've got a lot of friends and colleagues who are journalists, and even though I'm a media monitor, when I sit here, I'm taking part in being part of the media. So I think I can say that we, as the media, have suffered from a certain lack of self-reflection. We think we can tell everything in narratives rather than really finding what the real story is. And we're paying a price for that. And we get a little bit defensive when people say things like fake news, but it doesn't happen in a vacuum. All
right, and certainly we know that once that headline is achieved, then the argument comes up, what is greater? Is it the pen is mightier than the sword? That argument then rears its head. Amir, Dan, appreciate that insight and for that very nice discussion. Appreciate it.
Tracy.
All right, we're going